David Copperfield. Chapter 17. Somebody turns up. It has not occurred to me to mention Peggotty since I ran away. But, of course, I wrote her a letter almost as soon as I was housed at Dover, and another, and a longer letter, containing all particulars fully related, when my aunt took me formally under her protection. On my being settled at Dr. Strong's, I wrote to her again, detailing my happy condition and prospects. I never could have derived anything like the pleasure from spending the money Mr. Dick had given me, that I felt in sending a gold half-guinea to Peggotty, per post, enclosed in this last letter, to discharge the sum I had borrowed of her, in which epistle, not before, I mentioned about the young man with the donkey-cart. To these communications Peggotty replied as promptly, if not as concisely, as a merchant's clerk. Her utmost powers of expression, which were certainly not great in ink, were exhausted in the attempt to write what she felt on the subject of my journey. 4 sides of incoherent and interjectional beginnings of sentences, that had no end, except blots, were inadequate to afford her any relief. But the blots were more expressive to me than the best composition, for they showed me that Peggotty had been crying all over the paper, and what could I have desired more? I made out, without much difficulty, that she could not take quite kindly to my aunt yet. The notice was too short after so long a prepossession the other way. We never knew a person, she wrote, but to think that Miss Betsy should seem to be so different from what she had been thought to be, was immoral. That was her word. She was evidently still afraid of Miss Betsy, for she sent her grateful duty to her but timidly, and she was evidently afraid of me, too, and entertained the probability of my running away again soon, if I might judge from the repeated hints she threw out, that the coach fare to Yarmouth was always to be had of her for the asking. She gave me one piece of intelligence which affected me very much, namely, that there had been a sale of the furniture at our old home, and that Mr. and Miss Murdstone were gone away, and the house was shut up, to be let or sold. God knows I had no part in it while they remained there, but it pained me to think of the dear old place as altogether abandoned, of the weeds growing tall in the garden, and the fallen leaves lying thick and wet upon the paths. I imagined how the winds of winter would howl round it, how the cold rain would beat upon the window glass, how the moon would make ghosts on the walls of the empty rooms, watching their solitude all night. I thought afresh of the grave in the churchyard, underneath the tree, and it seemed as if the house were dead too, now, and all connected with my father and mother were faded away. There was no other news in Peggotty's letters. Mr. Barkis was an excellent husband, she said, though still a little near, but we all had our faults, and she had plenty, though I am sure I don't know what they were, and he sent his duty, and my little bedroom was always ready for me. Mr. Peggotty was well, and Ham was well, and Mrs. Gummidge was but poorly, and little Emily wouldn't send her love, but said that Peggotty might send it, if she liked. All this intelligence I dutifully imparted to my aunt, only reserving to myself the mention of little Emily, to whom I instinctively felt that she would not very tenderly incline. While I was yet new at Dr. Strong's, she made several excursions over to Canterbury to see me, and always at unseasonable hours, with the view, I suppose, of taking me by surprise. But, finding me well employed, and bearing a good character, and hearing on all hands that I rose fast in the school, she soon discontinued these visits. I saw her on a Saturday, every 3rd or 4th week, when I went over to Dover for a treat, and I saw Mr. Dick every alternate Wednesday, when he arrived by stagecoach at noon, to stay until next morning. On these occasions Mr. Dick never travelled without a leathern writing desk, containing a supply of stationery and the memorial, in relation to which document he had a notion that time was beginning to press now, and that it really must be got out of hand. Mr. Dick was very partial to gingerbread. To render his visits the more agreeable, my aunt had instructed me to open a credit for him at a cake shop, which was hampered with the stipulation that he should not be served with more than 1 shilling worth in the course of any one day. This, and the reference of all his little bills at the county inn where he slept, to my aunt, before they were paid, induced me to suspect that he was only allowed to rattle his money, and not to spend it. I found on further investigation that this was so, or at least there was an agreement between him and my aunt that he should account to her for all his disbursements. As he had no idea of deceiving her, and always desired to please her, he was thus made chary of launching into expense. On this point, as well as on all other possible points, Mr. Dick was convinced that my aunt was the wisest and most wonderful of women, as he repeatedly told me with infinite secrecy, and always in a whisper. "Trotwood," said Mr. Dick, with an air of mystery, after imparting this confidence to me, one Wednesday, "who's the man that hides near our house and frightens her?" "Frightens my aunt, sir." Mr. Dick nodded. "I thought nothing would have frightened her," he said, "for she's," here he whispered softly, "don't mention it, the wisest and most wonderful of women." Having said which, he drew back, to observe the effect which this description of her made upon me. "The first time he came," said Mr. Dick, "was, let me see, 1649 was the date of King Charles's execution. I think you said 1649. "Yes, sir." "I don't know how it can be," said Mr. Dick, sorely puzzled and shaking his head. "I don't think I am as old as that." "Was it in that year that the man appeared, sir?" I asked. "Why, really," said Mr. Dick, "I don't see how it can have been in that year, Trotwood. Did you get that date out of history?" "Yes, sir." "I suppose history never lies, does it?" said Mr. Dick, with a gleam of hope. "Oh dear, no, sir." I replied, most decisively. "I was ingenuous and young, and I thought so." "I can't make it out," said Mr. Dick, shaking his head. "There's something wrong, somewhere. However, it was very soon after the mistake was made of putting some of the trouble out of King Charles's head into my head, that the man first came. I was walking out with Miss Trotwood after tea, just at dark, and there he was, close to our house." "Walking about?" I inquired. "Walking about," repeated Mr. Dick. "Let me see, I must recollect a bit. And no, he was not walking about." I asked, as the shortest way to get at it, what he was doing. "Well, he wasn't there at all," said Mr. Dick, "until he came up behind her, and whispered. Then she turned round and fainted, and I stood still and looked at him, and he walked away. But that he should have been hiding ever since, in the ground or somewhere, is the most extraordinary thing." "Has he been hiding ever since?" I asked. "To be sure he has," retorted Mr. Dick, nodding his head gravely. "Never came out, till last night. We were walking last night, and he came up behind her again, and I knew him again." "And did he frighten my aunt again?" "All of a shiver," said Mr. Dick, counterfeiting that affection and making his teeth chatter. "Held by the palings. Cried. But, Trotwood, come here," getting me close to him, that he might whisper very softly, "Why did she give him money, boy, in the moonlight? He was a beggar, perhaps." Mr. Dick shook his head, as utterly renouncing the suggestion, and having replied a great many times, and with great confidence, "No beggar, no beggar, no beggar, sir," went on to say, that from his window he had afterwards, and late at night, seen my aunt give this person money outside the garden rails in the moonlight, who then slunk away, into the ground again, as he thought probable, and was seen no more, while my aunt came hurriedly and secretly back into the house, and had, even that morning, been quite different from her usual self, which preyed on Mr. Dick's mind that I had not the least belief, in the outset of this story, that the unknown was anything but a delusion of Mr. Dick's, and one of the line of that ill-fated prince who occasioned him so much difficulty, but after some reflection I began to entertain the question whether an attempt, or threat of an attempt, might have been twice made to take poor Mr. Dick himself from under my aunt's protection, and whether my aunt, the strength of whose kind feeling towards him I knew from herself, might have been induced to pay a price for his peace and quiet. As I was already much attached to Mr. Dick, and very solicitous for his welfare, my fears favoured this supposition. And for a long time his Wednesday hardly ever came round, without my entertaining a misgiving that he would not be on the coach-box as usual. There he always appeared, however, grey-headed, laughing, and happy, and he never had anything more to tell of the man who could frighten my aunt. These Wednesdays were the happiest days of Mr. Dick's life. They were far from being the least happy of mine. He soon became known to every boy in the school, and though he never took an active part in any game but kite-flying, was as deeply interested in all our sports as anyone among us. How often have I seen him, intent upon a match at marbles or peg-top, looking on with a face of unutterable interest, and hardly breathing at the critical times. How often, at hare and hounds, have I seen him mounted on a little knoll, cheering the whole field onto action, and waving his hat above his grey head, oblivious of King Charles the Martyr's head, and all belonging to it. How many a summer hour have I known to be but blissful minutes to him in the cricket field? How many winter days have I seen him, standing blue-nosed, in the snow and east wind, looking at the boys going down the long slide, and clapping his worsted gloves in rapture. He was an universal favourite, and his ingenuity in little things was transcendent. He could cut oranges into such devices as none of us had an idea of. He could make a boat out of anything, from a skewer upwards. He could turn cramp bones into chessmen, fashion Roman chariots from old court cards, make spoked wheels out of cotton reels, and bird cages of old wire. But he was greatest of all, perhaps, in the articles of string and straw, with which we were all persuaded he could do anything that could be done by hands. Mr. Dick's renown was not long confined to us. After a few Wednesdays, Dr. Strong himself made some inquiries of me about him, and I told him all my aunt had told me, which interested the doctor so much that he requested, on the occasion of his next visit, to be presented to him. This ceremony I performed, and the doctor begging Mr. Dick, whensoever he should not find me at the coach office, to come on there, and rest himself until our morning's work was over, it soon passed into a custom for Mr. Dick to come on as a matter of course, and, if we were a little late, as often happened on a Wednesday, to walk about the courtyard, waiting for me. Here he made the acquaintance of the doctor's beautiful young wife, paler than formerly, all this time, more rarely seen by me or anyone, I think, and not so gay, but not less beautiful, and so became more and more familiar by degrees, until, at last, he would come into the school and wait. He always sat in a particular corner, on a particular stool, which was called Dick, after him. Here he would sit, with his grey head bent forward, attentively listening to whatever might be going on, with a profound veneration for the learning he had never been able to acquire. This veneration Mr. Dick extended to the doctor, whom he thought the most subtle and accomplished philosopher of any age. It was long before Mr. Dick ever spoke to him otherwise than bareheaded, and even when he and the doctor had struck up quite a friendship, and would walk together by the hour, on that side of the courtyard which was known among us as the doctor's walk, Mr. Dick would pull off his hat at intervals to show his respect for wisdom and knowledge. How it ever came about that the doctor began to read out scraps of the famous dictionary, in these walks, I never knew. Perhaps he felt it all the same, at first, as reading to himself. However, it passed into a custom too, and Mr. Dick, listening with a face shining with pride and pleasure, in his heart of hearts believed the dictionary to be the most delightful book in the world. As I think of them going up and down before those schoolroom windows, the doctor reading with his complacent smile, an occasional flourish of the manuscript, or grave motion of his head, and Mr. Dick listening, enchained by interest, with his poor wits calmly wandering God knows where, upon the wings of hard words. I think of it as one of the pleasantest things, in a quiet way, that I have ever seen. I feel as if they might go walking to and fro forever, and the world might somehow be the better for it, as if 1,000 things it makes a noise about were not one half so good for it, or me, Agnes, was one of Mr. Dick's friends, very soon, and in often coming to the house, he made acquaintance with Uriah. The friendship between himself and me increased continually, and it was maintained on this odd footing, that, while Mr. Dick came professedly to look after me as my guardian, he always consulted me in any little matter of doubt that arose, and invariably guided himself by my advice, not only having a high respect for my native sagacity, but considering that I inherited a good deal from my aunt. One Thursday morning, when I was about to walk with Mr. Dick from the hotel to the coach office before going back to school, for we had an hour's school before breakfast, I met Uriah in the street, who reminded me of the promise I had made to take tea with himself and his mother, adding, with a writhe, "But I didn't expect you to keep it, Master Copperfield, we are so very humble." I really had not yet been able to make up my mind whether I liked Uriah or detested him, and I was very doubtful about it still, as I stood looking him in the face in the street. But I felt it quite an affront to be supposed proud, and said I only wanted to be asked. "Oh, if that's all, Master Copperfield," said Uriah, "and it really isn't our humbleness that prevents you, will you come this evening? But if it is our humbleness, I hope you won't mind owning to it, Master Copperfield, for we are well aware of our condition." I said I would mention it to Mr. Wickfield, and if he approved, as I had no doubt he would, I would come with pleasure. So, at 6 o'clock that evening, which was one of the early office evenings, I announced myself as ready. To Uriah, "Mother will be proud, indeed," he said, as we walked away together. "Or she would be proud, if it wasn't sinful, Master Copperfield." "Yet you didn't mind supposing I was proud this morning," I returned. "Oh dear, no, Master Copperfield," returned Uriah. "Oh, believe me, no. Such a thought never came into my head. I shouldn't have deemed it at all proud if you had thought us too humble for you, because we are so very humble. Have you been studying much law lately?" I asked, to change the subject. "Oh, Master Copperfield," he said, with an air of self-denial, "my reading is hardly to be called study. I have passed an hour or two in the evening, sometimes, with Mr. Tidd." "Rather hard, I suppose," said I. "He is hard to me sometimes," returned Uriah, "but I don't know what he might be to a gifted person." After beating a little tune on his chin as he walked on, with the 2 forefingers of his skeleton right hand, he added, "There are expressions, you see, Master Copperfield, Latin words and terms, in Mr. Tidd, that are trying to a reader of my humble attainments. Would you like to be taught Latin?" I said briskly, "I will teach it you with pleasure, as I learn it." "Oh, thank you, Master Copperfield," he answered, shaking his head. "I am sure it's very kind of you to make the offer, but I am much too humble to accept it." "What nonsense, Uriah!" "Oh, indeed you must excuse me, Master Copperfield. I am greatly obliged, and I should like it of all things, I assure you, but I am far too humble. There are people enough to tread upon me in my lowly state, without my doing outrage to their feelings by possessing learning. Learning ain't for me. A person like myself had better not aspire. If he is to get on in life, he must get on humbly, Master Copperfield." I never saw his mouth so wide, or the creases in his cheeks so deep, as when he delivered himself of these sentiments, shaking his head all the time, and writhing modestly. "I think you are wrong, Uriah," I said. "I dare say there are several things that I could teach you, if you would like to learn them." "Oh, I don't doubt that, Master Copperfield," he answered. "Not in the least. But not being humble yourself, you don't judge well, perhaps, for them that are. I won't provoke my betters with knowledge, thank you. I'm much too humble. Here is my humble dwelling, Master Copperfield." We entered a low, old-fashioned room, walked straight into from the street, and found there Mrs. Heep, who was the dead image of Uriah, only short. She received me with the utmost humility, and apologized to me for giving her son a kiss, observing that, lowly as they were, they had their natural affections, which they hoped would give no offense to anyone. It was a perfectly decent room, half parlor and half kitchen, but not at all a snug room. The tea things were set upon the table, and the kettle was boiling on the hob. There was a chest of drawers with an escritoire top, for Uriah to read or write out of an evening. There was Uriah's blue bag lying down and vomiting papers. There was a company of Uriah's books commanded by Mr. Tidd. There was a corner cupboard, and there were the usual articles of furniture. I don't remember that any individual object had a bare, pinched, spare look, but I do remember that the whole place had that it was perhaps a part of Mrs. Heep's humility, that she still wore weeds. Notwithstanding the lapse of time that had occurred since Mr. Heep's decease, she still wore weeds. I think there was some compromise in the cap, but otherwise she was as weedy as in the early days of her mourning. "This is a day to be remembered, my Uriah, I am sure," said Mrs. Heep, making the tea, "when Master Copperfield pays us a visit." "I said you'd think so, Mother," said Uriah. "If I could have wished Father to remain among us for any reason," said Mrs. Heep, "it would have been, that he might have known his company this afternoon." I felt embarrassed by these compliments, but I was sensible, too, of being entertained as an honored guest, and I thought Mrs. Heep an agreeable woman. "My Uriah," said Mrs. Heep, "has looked forward to this, sir, a long while. He had his fears that our humbleness stood in the way, and I joined in them myself. Humble we are, humble we have been, humble we shall ever be," said Mrs. Heep. "I am sure you have no occasion to be so," I said, "unless you like." "Thank you, sir," retorted Mrs. Heep. "We know our station and are thankful in it." I found that Mrs. Heep gradually got nearer to me, and that Uriah gradually got opposite to me, and that they respectfully plied me with the choicest of the eatables on the table. There was nothing particularly choice there, to be sure, but I took the will for the deed, and felt that they were very attentive. Presently they began to talk about aunts, and then I told them about mine, and about fathers and mothers, and then I told them about mine, and then Mrs. Heep began to talk about fathers-in-law, and then I began to tell her about mine, but stopped, because my aunt had advised me to observe a silence on that subject. A tender young cork, however, would have had no more chance against a pair of corkscrews, or a tender young tooth against a pair of dentists, or a little shuttlecock against two battledores, than I had against Uriah and Mrs. Heep. They did just what they liked with me, and wormed things out of me that I had no desire to tell, with a certainty I blush to think of, the more especially, as in my juvenile frankness, I took some credit to myself for being so confidential and felt that I was quite the patron of my two respectful entertainers. They were very fond of one another, that was certain. I take it, that had its effect upon me, as a touch of nature, but the skill with which the one followed up whatever the other said, was a touch of art which I was still less proof against. When there was nothing more to be got out of me about myself, for on the Murdstone and Grinby life, and on my journey, I was dumb. They began about Mr. Wickfield and Agnes. Uriah threw the ball to Mrs. Heep. Mrs. Heep caught it and threw it back to Uriah. Uriah kept it up a little while, then sent it back to Mrs. Heep, and so they went on tossing it about until I had no idea who had got it, and was quite bewildered. The ball itself was always changing too. Now it was Mr. Wickfield, now Agnes, now the excellence of Mr. Wickfield, now my admiration of Agnes. now the extent of Mr. Wickfield's business and resources, now our domestic life after dinner, now the wine that Mr. Wickfield took, the reason why he took it, and the pity that it was he took so much, now one thing, now another, then everything at once, and all the time, without appearing to speak very often, or to do anything but sometimes encourage them a little, for fear they should be overcome by their humility and the honor of my company. I found myself perpetually letting out something or other that I had no business to let out, and seeing the effect of it in the twinkling of Uriah's dinted nostrils, that I had begun to be a little uncomfortable, and to wish myself well out of the visit, when a figure coming down the street passed the door. It stood open to air the room, which was warm, the weather being close for the time of year, came back again, looked in, and walked in, exclaiming loudly, "Copperfield! Is it possible?" It was Mr. Micawber. It was Mr. Micawber, with his eyeglass, and his walking stick, and his shirt collar, and his genteel air, and the condescending roll in his voice, all complete. "My dear Copperfield," said Mr. Micawber, putting out his hand, "this is indeed a meeting which is calculated to impress the mind with a sense of the instability and uncertainty of all human. In short, it is a most extraordinary meeting. Walking along the street, reflecting upon the probability of something turning up, of which I am at present rather sanguine, I find a young but valued friend turn up, who is connected with the most eventful period of my life, I may say, with the turning point of my existence. Copperfield, my dear fellow, how do you do? I cannot say, I really cannot say, that I was glad to see Mr. Micawber there, but I was glad to see him too, and shook hands with him, heartily, inquiring how Mrs. Micawber was. "Thank you," said Mr. Micawber, waving his hand as of old, and settling his chin in his shirt collar. "She is tolerably convalescent. The twins no longer derive their sustenance from nature's founts. In short," said Mr. Micawber, in one of his bursts of confidence, "they are weaned, and Mrs. Micawber is, at present, my travelling companion. She will be rejoiced, Copperfield, to renew her acquaintance with one who has proved himself in all respects a worthy minister at the sacred altar of friendship." "I said I should be delighted to see her. You are very good," said Mr. Micawber. Mr. Micawber then smiled, settled his chin again, and looked about him. "I have discovered my friend Copperfield," said Mr. Micawber genteelly, and without addressing himself particularly to anyone, not in solitude, but partaking of a social meal in company with a widow lady, and one who is apparently her offspring. "In short," said Mr. Micawber, in another of his bursts of confidence, "her son. I shall esteem it an honor to be presented." I could do no less, under these circumstances, than make Mr. Micawber known to Uriah Heep and his mother, which I accordingly did. As they abased themselves before him, Mr. Micawber took a seat, and waved his hand in his most courtly manner. "Any friend of my friend Copperfield's," said Mr. Micawber, "has a personal claim upon myself." "We are too humble, sir," said Mrs. Heep, "my son and me, to be the friends of Master Copperfield. He has been so good as take his tea with us, and we are thankful to him for his company, also to you, sir, for your notice." Returned Mr. Micawber, with a bow. "You are very obliging. And what are you doing, Copperfield?" "Still in the wine trade." I was excessively anxious to get Mr. Micawber away, and replied, with my hat in my hand, and a very red face, "I have no doubt that I was a pupil at Dr. Strong's." "A pupil?" said Mr. Micawber, raising his eyebrows. "I am extremely happy to hear it. Although a mind like my friend Copperfield's, to Uriah and Mrs. Heep, does not require that cultivation which, without his knowledge of men and things, it would require, still it is a rich soil teeming with latent vegetation. In short," said Mr. Micawber, smiling, in another burst of confidence, "it is an intellect capable of getting up the classics to any extent." Uriah, with his long hands slowly twining over one another, made a ghastly writhe from the waist upwards, to express his concurrence in this estimation of me. "Shall we go and see Mrs. Micawber, sir?" I said, "To get Mr. Micawber away, if you will do her that favour, Copperfield," replied Mr. Micawber, rising. "I have no scruple in saying, in the presence of our friends here, that I am a man who has, for some years, contended against the pressure of pecuniary difficulties." I knew he was certain to say something of this kind. He always would be so boastful about his difficulties. Sometimes I have risen superior to my difficulties. Sometimes my difficulties have, in short, have floored me. There have been times when I have administered a succession of faces to them. There have been times when they have been too many for me, and I have given in, and said to Mrs. Micawber, in the words of Cato, "Plato, thou reasonest well. It's all up now. I can show fight no more." "But at no time of my life," said Mr. Micawber, "have I enjoyed a higher degree of satisfaction than in pouring my griefs, if I may describe difficulties, chiefly arising out of warrants of attorney and promissory notes at 2 and 4 months, by that word, into the bosom of my friend Copperfield." Mr. Micawber closed this handsome tribute by saying, "Mr. Heep, good evening. Mrs. Heep, your servant," and then walking out with me in his most fashionable manner, making a good deal of noise on the pavement with his shoes, and humming a tune as we went. It was a little in where Mr. Micawber put up, and he occupied a little room in it, partitioned off from the commercial room, and strongly flavoured with tobacco smoke. I think it was over the kitchen, because a warm greasy smell appeared to come up through the chinks in the floor, and there was a flabby perspiration on the walls. I know it was near the bar, on account of the smell of spirits and jingling of glasses. Here, recumbent on a small sofa, underneath a picture of a racehorse, with her head close to the fire, and her feet pushing the mustard off the dumb waiter at the other end of the room, was Mrs. Micawber, to whom Mr. Micawber entered first, saying, "My dear, allow me to introduce to you a pupil of Dr. Strong's." I noticed, by the by, that although Mr. Micawber was just as much confused as ever about my age and standing, he always remembered, as a genteel thing, that I was a pupil of Dr. Strong's. Mrs. Micawber was amazed, but very glad to see me. I was very glad to see her too, and, after an affectionate greeting on both sides, sat down on the small sofa near her. "My dear," said Mr. Micawber, "if you will mention to Copperfield what our present position is, which I have no doubt he will like to know, I will go and look at the paper the while, and see whether anything turns up among the advertisements." "I thought you were at Plymouth, I said to Mrs. Micawber, as he went out. "My dear Master Copperfield," she replied, "we went to Plymouth." "To be on the spot," I hinted. "Just so," said Mrs. Micawber. "To be on the spot. But, the truth is, talent is not wanted in the custom house. The local influence of my family was quite unavailing to obtain any employment in that department, for a man of Mr. Micawber's abilities. They would rather not have a man of Mr. Micawber's abilities. He would only show the deficiency of the others. Apart from which," said Mrs. Micawber, "I will not disguise from you, my dear Master Copperfield, that when that branch of my family which is settled in Plymouth became aware that Mr. Micawber was accompanied by myself, and by little Wilkins and his sister, and by the twins, they did not receive him with that ardour which he might have expected, being so newly released from captivity. In fact," said Mrs. Micawber, lowering her voice, "this is between ourselves, our reception was cool." "Dear me." I said, "Yes," said Mrs. Micawber. "It is truly painful to contemplate mankind in such an aspect, Master Copperfield, but our reception was, decidedly, cool. There is no doubt about it. In fact, that branch of my family which is settled in Plymouth became quite personal to Mr. Micawber, before we had been there a week." I said, and thought, that they ought to be ashamed of themselves. Still, so it was, continued Mrs. Micawber. Under such circumstances, what could a man of Mr. Micawber's spirit do? But one obvious course was left: to borrow, of that branch of my family, the money to return to London, and to return at any sacrifice. Then you all came back again, I said. We all came back again, replied Mrs. Micawber. Since then, I have consulted other branches of my family on the course which it is most expedient for Mr. Micawber to take, for I maintain that he must take some course, Master Copperfield, said Mrs. Micawber, argumentatively. It is clear that a family of 6, not including a domestic, cannot live upon air. Certainly, said I. The opinion of those other branches of my family, pursued Mrs. Micawber, is that Mr. Micawber should immediately turn his attention to coals. To what, To coals, said Mrs. Micawber. To the coal trade. Mr. Micawber was induced to think, on inquiry, that there might be an opening for a man of his talent in the Medway coal trade. Then, as Mr. Micawber very properly said, the first step to be taken clearly was, to come and see the Medway, which we came and saw. I say we, Master Copperfield, for I never will, said Mrs. Micawber with emotion. I never will desert Mr. Micawber. I murmured my admiration and approbation. We came, repeated Mrs. Micawber, and saw the Medway. My opinion of the coal trade on that river is, that it may require talent, but that it certainly requires capital. Talent, Mr. Micawber has. Capital, Mr. Micawber has not. We saw, I think, the greater part of the Medway, and that is my individual conclusion. Being so near here, Mr. Micawber was of opinion that it would be rash not to come on and see the cathedral. Firstly, on account of its being so well worth seeing, and our never having seen it. And secondly, on account of the great probability of something turning up in a cathedral town. We have been here, said Mrs. Micawber, 3 days. Nothing has, as yet, turned up, and it may not surprise you, my dear Master Copperfield, so much as it would a stranger, to know that we are at present waiting for a remittance from London, to discharge our pecuniary obligations at this hotel. Until the arrival of that remittance, said Mrs. Micawber with much feeling, I am cut off from my home. I allude to lodgings in Pentonville, from my boy and girl, and from my twins. I felt the utmost sympathy for Mr. and Mrs. Micawber in this anxious extremity, and said as much to Mr. Micawber, who now returned, adding that I only wished I had money enough to lend them the amount they needed. Mr. Micawber's answer expressed the disturbance of his mind. He said, shaking hands with me, Copperfield, you are a true friend, but when the worst comes to the worst, no man is without a friend who is possessed of shaving materials. At this dreadful hint Mrs. Micawber threw her arms round Mr. Micawber's neck and entreated him to be calm. He wept, but so far recovered, almost immediately, as to ring the bell for the waiter, and bespeak a hot kidney pudding and a plate of shrimps for breakfast in the morning. When I took my leave of them, they both pressed me so much to come and dine before they went away, that I could not refuse. But, as I knew I could not come next day, when I should have a good deal to prepare in the evening, Mr. Micawber arranged that he would call at Dr. Strong's in the course of the morning, having a presentiment that the remittance would arrive by that post, and proposed the day after, if it would suit me better. Accordingly, I was called out of school next forenoon, and found Mr. Micawber in the parlour, who had called to say that the dinner would take place as proposed. When I asked him if the remittance had come, he pressed my hand and departed as I was looking out of window that same evening. It surprised me, and made me rather uneasy, to see Mr. Micawber and Uriah Heep walk past, arm in arm, Uriah humbly sensible of the honour that was done him, and Mr. Micawber taking a bland delight in extending his patronage to Uriah. But I was still more surprised when I went to the little hotel next day at the appointed dinner hour, which was 4 o'clock, to find, from what Mr. Micawber said, that he had gone home with Uriah, and had drunk brandy and water at Mrs. Heep's. "And I'll tell you what, my dear Copperfield," said Mr. Micawber, "your friend Heep is a young fellow who might be Attorney General. If I had known that young man, at the period when my difficulties came to a crisis, all I can say is, that I believe my creditors would have been a great deal better managed than they were." I hardly understood how this could have been, seeing that Mr. Micawber had paid them nothing at all as it was, but I did not like to ask. Neither did I like to say that I hope he had not been too communicative to Uriah, or to inquire if they had talked much about me. I was afraid of hurting Mr. Micawber's feelings, or, at all events, Mrs. Micawber's, she being very sensitive. But I was uncomfortable about it, too, and often thought about it afterwards. We had a beautiful little dinner. Quite an elegant dish of fish, the kidney end of a loin of veal, roasted, fried sausage meat, a partridge, and a pudding. There was wine, and there was strong ale. And after dinner Mrs. Micawber made us a bowl of hot punch with her own hands. Mr. Micawber was uncommonly convivial. I never saw him such good company. He made his face shine with the punch, so that it looked as if it had been varnished all over. He got cheerfully sentimental about the town, and proposed success to it, observing that Mrs. Micawber and himself had been made extremely snug and comfortable there, and that he never should forget the agreeable hours they had passed in Canterbury. He proposed me afterwards, and he, and Mrs. Micawber, and I, took a review of our past acquaintance, in the course of which we sold the property all over again. Then I proposed Mrs. Micawber, or, at least, said, modestly, "If you'll allow me, Mrs. Micawber, I shall now have the pleasure of drinking your health." On which Mr. Micawber delivered an eulogium on Mrs. Micawber's character, and said she had ever been his guide, philosopher, and friend, and that he would recommend me, when I came to a marrying time of life, to marry such another woman, if such another woman could be found. As the punch disappeared, Mr. Micawber became still more friendly and convivial. Mrs. Micawber's spirits becoming elevated, too, we sang Auld Lang Syne. When we came to Here's a Hand, my trusty Frere, we all joined hands round the table, and when we declared we would take a right good Willie Wart, and hadn't the least idea what it meant, we were really affected. In a word, I never saw anybody so thoroughly jovial as Mr. Micawber was, down to the very last moment of the evening, when I took a hearty farewell of himself and his amiable wife. Consequently, I was not prepared, at 7 o'clock next morning, to receive the following communication, dated 9:30 in the evening, a quarter of an hour after I had left him. "My dear young friend, the die is cast, all is over. Hiding the ravages of care with a sickly mask of mirth, I have not informed you, this evening, that there is no hope of the remittance. Under these circumstances, alike humiliating to endure, humiliating to contemplate, and humiliating to relate, I have discharged the pecuniary liability contracted at this establishment, by giving a note of hand, made payable 14 days after date, at my residence, Pentonville, London. When it becomes due, it will not be taken up. The result is destruction. The bolt is impending, and the tree must fall. Let the wretched man who now addresses you, my dear Copperfield, be a beacon to you through life. He writes with that intention, and in that hope. If he could think himself of so much use, one gleam of day might, by possibility, penetrate into the cheerless dungeon of his remaining existence, though his longevity is, at present, to say the least of it, extremely problematical. This is the last communication, my dear Copperfield, you will ever receive from the beggared outcast, Wilkins Micawber. I was so shocked by the contents of this heartrending letter, that I ran off directly towards the little hotel with the intention of taking it on my way to Dr. Strong's, and trying to soothe Mr. Micawber with a word of comfort. But, halfway there, I met the London coach with Mr. and Mrs. Micawber up behind. Mr. Micawber, the very picture of tranquil enjoyment, smiling at Mrs. Micawber's conversation, eating walnuts out of a paper bag, with a bottle sticking out of his breast pocket. As they did not see me, I thought it best, all things considered, not to see them. So, with a great weight taken off my mind, I turned into a by-street that was the nearest way to school, and felt, upon the whole, relieved that they were gone, though I still like them very much, nevertheless. David Copperfield. Chapter 18. A retrospect. My school days. The silent gliding on of my existence, the unseen and felt progress of my life, from childhood up to youth. Let me think, as I look back upon that flowing water, now a dry channel overgrown with leaves, whether there are any marks along its course, by which I can remember how it ran. A moment, and I occupy my place in the cathedral, where we all went together, every Sunday morning, assembling first at school for that purpose. The earthy smell, the sunless air, the sensation of the world being shut out, the resounding of the organ through the black and white arched galleries and aisles, are wings that take me back, and hold me hovering above those days, in a half-sleeping and half-waking dream that I am not the last boy in the school. I have risen in a few months, over several heads. But the first boy seems to me a mighty creature, dwelling afar off, whose giddy height is unattainable. Agnes says no, but I say yes, and tell her that she little thinks what stores of knowledge have been mastered by the wonderful being, at whose place she thinks I, even I, weak aspirant, may arrive in time. He is not my private friend and public patron, as Steerforth was, but I hold him in a reverential respect. I chiefly wonder what he'll be, when he leaves Dr. Strong's, and what mankind will do to maintain any place against him. But who is this that breaks upon me? This is Miss Shepherd, whom I love. Miss Shepherd is a boarder at the Mrs. Nettingall's establishment. I adore Miss Shepherd. She is a little girl, in a spencer, with a round face and curly flaxen hair. The Mrs. Nettingall's young ladies come to the cathedral too. I cannot look upon my book, for I must look upon Miss Shepherd. When the choristers chaunt, I hear Miss Shepherd. In the service I mentally insert Miss Shepherd's name. I put her in among the royal family. At home, in my own room, I am sometimes moved to cry out, "Oh, Miss Shepherd!" in a transport of love. For some time, I am doubtful of Miss Shepherd's feelings, but, at length, fate being propitious, we meet at the dancing school. I have Miss Shepherd for my partner. I touch Miss Shepherd's glove, and feel a thrill go up the right arm of my jacket, and come out at my hair. I say nothing to Miss Shepherd, but we understand each other. Miss Shepherd and myself live but to be united. Why do I secretly give Miss Shepherd 12 Brazil nuts for a present, I wonder? They are not expressive of affection. They are difficult to pack into a parcel of any regular shape. They are hard to crack, even in room doors, and they are oily when cracked. Yet I feel that they are appropriate to Miss Shepherd. Soft, seedy biscuits, also, I bestow upon Miss Shepherd, and oranges innumerable. Once, I kiss Miss Shepherd in the cloakroom. Ecstasy! What are my agony and indignation next day, when I hear a flying rumour that the Misses Nettingall have stood Miss Shepherd in the stocks for turning in her toes. Miss Shepherd being the one pervading theme and vision of my life, how do I ever come to break with her? I can't conceive. And yet a coolness grows between Miss Shepherd and myself. Whispers reach me of Miss Shepherd having said she wished I wouldn't stare so, and having avowed a preference for Master Jones, a boy of no merit whatever. The gulf between me and Miss Shepherd widens. At last, one day, I meet the Mrs. Nettingall's establishment out walking. Miss Shepherd makes a face as she goes by, and laughs to her companion. All is over. The devotion of a life, it seems a life, it is all the same, is at an end. Miss Shepherd comes out of the morning service, and the royal family know her no more that I am higher in the school, and no one breaks my peace. I am not at all polite, now, to the Mrs. Nettingall's young ladies, and shouldn't dote on any of them, if they were twice as many and 20 times as beautiful. I think the dancing school a tiresome affair, and wonder why the girls can't dance by themselves and leave us alone. I am growing great in Latin verses, and neglect the laces of my boots. Dr. Strong refers to me in public as a promising young scholar. Mr. Dick is wild with joy, and my aunt remits me a guinea by the next post. The shade of a young butcher rises, like the apparition of an armed head in Macbeth. Who is this young butcher? He is the terror of the youth of Canterbury. There is a vague belief abroad that the beef suet with which he anoints his hair gives him unnatural strength, and that he is a match for a man. He is a broad-faced, bull-necked, young butcher, with rough red cheeks, an ill-conditioned mind, and an injurious tongue. His main use of this tongue is to disparage Dr. Strong's young gentlemen. He says, publicly, that if they want anything he'll give it 'em. He names individuals among them, myself included, whom he could undertake to settle with one hand, and the other tied behind him. He waylays the smaller boys to punch their unprotected heads, and calls challenges after me in the open streets. For these sufficient reasons I resolved to fight the butcher. It is a summer evening, down in a green hollow, at the corner of a wall. I meet the butcher by appointment. I am attended by a select body of our boys, the butcher, by 2 other butchers, a young publican, and a sweep. The preliminaries are adjusted, and the butcher and myself stand face to face. In a moment the butcher lights 10,000 candles out of my left eyebrow. In another moment, I don't know where the wall is, or where I am, or where anybody is. I hardly know which is myself and which the butcher. We are always in such a tangle and tussle, knocking about upon the trodden grass. Sometimes I see the butcher, bloody but confident. Sometimes I see nothing, and sit gasping on my second's knee. Sometimes I go in at the butcher madly, and cut my knuckles open against his face, without appearing to discompose him at all. At last I awake, very queer about the head, as from a giddy sleep, and see the butcher walking off, congratulated by the 2 other butchers and the sweep and publican, and putting on his coat as he goes, from which I augur, justly, that the victory is his. I am taken home in a sad plight, and I have beefsteaks put to my eyes, and am rubbed with vinegar and brandy, and find a great puffy place bursting out on my upper lip, which swells immoderately. For 3 or 4 days I remain at home, a very ill-looking subject, with a green shade over my eyes, and I should be very dull, but that Agnes is a sister to me, and condoles with me, and reads to me, and makes the time light and happy. Agnes has my confidence completely, always. I tell her all about the butcher, and the wrongs he has heaped upon me. She thinks I couldn't have done otherwise than fight the butcher, while she shrinks and trembles at my having fought him. Time has stolen on unobserved, for Adams is not the head boy in the days that come now, nor has he been this many and many a day. Adams has left the school so long, that when he comes back, on a visit to Dr. Strong, there are not many there, besides myself, who know him. Adams is going to be called to the bar almost directly, and is to be an advocate, and to wear a wig. I am surprised to find him a meeker man than I had thought, and less imposing in appearance. He has not staggered the world yet, either, for it goes on, as well as I can make out, pretty much the same as if he had never joined it. A blank, through which the warriors of poetry and history march on in stately hosts that seem to have no end. And what comes next? I am the head boy, now. I look down on the line of boys below me, with a condescending interest in such of them as bring to my mind the boy I was myself, when I first came there. That little fellow seems to be no part of me. I remember him as something left behind upon the road of life, as something I have passed, rather than have actually been, and almost think of him as of someone else. And the little girl I saw on that first day at Mr. Wickfield's, where is she? Gone also. In her stead, the perfect likeness of the picture, a child likeness no more, moves about the house, and Agnes, my sweet sister, as I call her in my thoughts, my counselor and friend, the better angel of the lives of all who come within her calm, good, self-denying influence, is quite a woman. What other changes have come upon me, besides the changes in my growth and looks, and in the knowledge I have garnered all this while? I wear a gold watch and chain, a ring upon my little finger, and a long-tailed coat, and I use a great deal of bear's grease, which, taken in conjunction with the ring, looks bad. Am I in love again? I am. I worship the eldest Miss Larkins. The eldest Miss Larkins is not a little girl. She is a tall, dark, black-eyed, fine figure of a woman. The eldest Miss Larkins is not a chicken, for the youngest Miss Larkins is not that, and the eldest must be 3 or 4 years older. Perhaps the eldest Miss Larkins may be about 30. My passion for her is beyond all bounds. The eldest Miss Larkins knows officers. It is an awful thing to bear. I see them speaking to her in the street. I see them cross the way to meet her, when her bonnet, she has a bright taste in bonnets, is seen coming down the pavement, accompanied by her sister's bonnet. She laughs and talks, and seems to like it. I spend a good deal of my own spare time in walking up and down to meet her. If I can bow to her once in the day, I know her to bow to. Knowing Mr. Larkins, I am happier. I deserve a bow now and then. The raging agonies I suffer on the night of the race ball, where I know the eldest Miss Larkins will be dancing with the military, ought to have some compensation, if there be even-handed justice in the world. Damn, why passion takes away my appetite, and makes me wear my newest silk neckerchief continually. I have no relief but in putting on my best clothes, and having my boots cleaned over and over again. I seem, then, to be worthier of the eldest Miss Larkins. Everything that belongs to her, or is connected with her, is precious to me. Mr. Larkins, a gruff old gentleman with a double chin, and one of his eyes immovable in his head, is fraught with interest to me. When I can't meet his daughter, I go where I am likely to meet him, to say, how do you do, Mr. Larkins? Are the young ladies and all the family quite well? Seems so pointed, that I blush that I think continually about my age. Say I am 17, and say that 17 is young for the eldest Miss Larkins. What of that? Besides, I shall be 21 in no time almost. I regularly take walks outside Mr. Larkins's house in the evening, though it cuts me to the heart to see the officers go in, or to hear them up in the drawing-room, where the eldest Miss Larkins plays the harp. I even walk, on 2 or 3 occasions, in a sickly, spoony manner, round and round the house after the family are gone to bed, wondering which is the eldest Miss Larkins's chamber, and pitching, I dare say now, on Mr. Larkins's instead, wishing that a fire would burst out, that the assembled crowd would stand appalled, that I, dashing through them with a ladder, might rear it against her window, save her in my arms, go back for something she had left behind, and perish in the flames. For I am generally disinterested in my love, and think I could be content to make a figure before Miss Larkins, and expire generally, but not always. Sometimes brighter visions rise before me. When I dress, the occupation of 2 hours, for a great ball given at the Larkinses, the anticipation of 3 weeks, I indulge my fancy with pleasing images. I picture myself taking courage to make a declaration to Miss Larkins. I picture Miss Larkins sinking her head upon my shoulder, and saying, "Oh, Mr. Copperfield, Can I believe my ears? I picture Mr. Larkins waiting on me next morning and saying, "My dear Copperfield, my daughter has told me all. Youth is no objection. Here are £20,000. Be happy." I picture my aunt relenting and blessing us, and Mr. Dick and Dr. Strong being present at the marriage ceremony. I am a sensible fellow, I believe, on looking back, I mean, and modest I am sure, but all this goes on notwithstanding. I repair to the enchanted house, where there are lights, chattering, music, flowers, officers, I am sorry to see, and the eldest Miss Larkins, a blaze of beauty. She is dressed in blue, with blue flowers in her hair, forget-me-nots, as if she had any need to wear forget-me-nots. It is the first really grown-up party that I have ever been invited to, and I am a little uncomfortable, for I appear not to belong to anybody, and nobody appears to have anything to say to me, except Mr. Larkins, who asks me how my schoolfellows are, which he needn't do, as I have not come there to be insulted. But after I have stood in the doorway for some time, and feasted my eyes upon the goddess of my heart, she approaches me, she, the eldest Miss Larkins, and asks me pleasantly if I dance. I stammer, with a bow, "With you, Miss Larkins." "With no one else?" inquires Miss Larkins. "I should have no pleasure in dancing with anyone else." Miss Larkins laughs and blushes, or I think she blushes, and says, "Next time but one, I shall be very glad." The time arrives. "It is a waltz, I think," Miss Larkins doubtfully observes, when I present myself. "Do you waltz?" "If not, Captain Bailey. But I do waltz, pretty well, too, as it happens, and I take Miss Larkins out. I take her sternly from the side of Captain Bailey. He is wretched, I have no doubt, but he is nothing to me. I have been wretched, too. I waltz with the eldest Miss Larkins. I don't know where, among whom, or how long. I only know that I swim about in space, with a blue angel, in a state of blissful delirium, until I find myself alone with her in a little room, resting on a sofa. She admires a flower, pink Camellia japonica, price £0.50, in my buttonhole. I give it her, and say, "I ask an inestimable price for it, Miss Larkins." "Indeed? What is that?" returns Miss Larkins. "A flower of yours, that I may treasure it as a miser does gold." "You're a bold boy," says Miss Larkins. "There." She gives it me, not displeased, and I put it to my lips, and then into my breast. Miss Larkins, laughing, draws her hand through my arm, and says, "Now take me back to Captain Bailey." I am lost in the recollection of this delicious interview, and the waltz, when she comes to me again, with a plain elderly gentleman who has been playing whist all night, upon her arm, and says, "Oh, here is my bold friend. Mr. Chessel wants to know you, Mr. Copperfield." I feel at once that he is a friend of the family, and am much gratified. "I admire your taste, sir," says Mr. Chessel. "It does you credit. I suppose you don't take much interest in hops, but I am a pretty large grower myself, and if you ever like to come over to our neighborhood of Ashford, and take a run about our place, we shall be glad for you to stop as long as you like." I thank Mr. Chessel warmly, and shake hands. I think I am in a happy dream. I waltz with the eldest Miss Larkins once again. She says I waltz so well. I go home in a state of unspeakable bliss, and waltz in imagination, all night long, with my arm round the blue waist of my dear divinity. For some days afterwards, I am lost in rapturous reflections, but I neither see her in the street, nor when I call. I am imperfectly consoled for this disappointment by the sacred pledge, "The perished flower, Trotwood," says Agnes, one day after dinner. "Who do you think is going to be married tomorrow?" Someone you admire. Not you, I suppose, Agnes. Not me. Raising her cheerful face from the music she is copying. Do you hear him, Papa? The eldest Miss Larkins. 2. To Captain Bailey. I have just enough power to ask. No, to no captain. To Mr. Chessel, a hop grower. I am terribly dejected for about a week or two. I take off my ring, I wear my worst clothes, I use no bear's grease, and I frequently lament over the late Miss Larkins's faded flower. Being, by that time, rather tired of this kind of life, and having received new provocation from the butcher, I throw the flower away, go out with the butcher, and gloriously defeat him. This, and the resumption of my ring, as well as of the bear's grease in moderation, are the last marks I can discern, now, in my progress to 17. David Copperfield. Chapter 19. I look about me, and make a discovery I am doubtful whether I was at heart glad or sorry, when my school days drew to an end, and the time came for my leaving Dr. Strong's. I had been very happy there. I had a great attachment for the doctor, and I was eminent and distinguished in that little world. For these reasons I was sorry to go, but for other reasons, unsubstantial enough, I was glad. Misty ideas of being a young man at my own disposal, of the importance attaching to a young man at his own disposal, of the wonderful things to be seen and done by that magnificent animal, and the wonderful effects he could not fail to make upon society, lured me away. So powerful were these visionary considerations in my boyish mind, that I seem, according to my present way of thinking, to have left school without natural regret. The separation has not made the impression on me that other separations have. I try in vain to recall how I felt about it, and what its circumstances were, but it is not momentous in my recollection. I suppose the opening prospect confused me. I know that my juvenile experiences went for little or nothing then, and that life was more like a great fairy story, which I was just about to begin to read, than anything else. My aunt and I had held many grave deliberations on the calling, to which I should be devoted. For a year or more I had endeavored to find a satisfactory answer to her often repeated question, what I would like to be. But I had no particular liking, that I could discover, for anything. If I could have been inspired with a knowledge of the science of navigation, taken the command of a fast-sailing expedition, and gone round the world on a triumphant voyage of discovery, I think I might have considered myself completely suited. But, in the absence of any such miraculous provision, my desire was to apply myself to some pursuit that would not lie too heavily upon her purse, and to do my duty in it, whatever it might be. Mr. Dick had regularly assisted at our councils, with a meditative and sage demeanor. He never made a suggestion but once, and on that occasion, I don't know what put it in his head, he suddenly proposed that I should be a brazier. My aunt received this proposal so very ungraciously, that he never ventured on a second, but ever afterwards confined himself to looking watchfully at her for her suggestions, and rattling his money. Trot, I tell you what, my dear, said my aunt, one morning in the Christmas season when I left school, as this knotty point is still unsettled, and as we must not make a mistake in our decision if we can help it, I think we had better take a little breathing time. In the meanwhile, you must try to look at it from a new point of view, and not as a schoolboy. I will, aunt. It has occurred to me, pursued my aunt, that a little change, and a glimpse of life out of doors, may be useful in helping you to know your own mind, and form a cooler judgment. Suppose you were to go down into the old part of the country again, for instance, and see that out-of-the-way woman with the savagest of names, said my aunt, rubbing her nose, for she could never thoroughly forgive Peggotty for being so called. Of all things in the world, aunt, I should like it best. Well, said my aunt, that's lucky, for I should like it too. but it's natural and rational that you should like it. And I am very well persuaded that whatever you do, Trot, will always be natural and rational." "I hope so, Aunt." "Your sister, Betsy Trotwood," said my aunt, "would have been as natural and rational a girl as ever breathed. You'll be worthy of her, won't you?" "I hope I shall be worthy of you, Aunt. That will be enough for me." "It's a mercy that poor dear baby of a mother of yours didn't live," said my aunt, looking at me approvingly, "or she'd have been so vain of her boy by this time, that her soft little head would have been completely turned, if there was anything of it left to turn." My aunt always excused any weakness of her own in my behalf, by transferring it in this way to my poor mother. "Bless me, Trotwood, how you do remind me of her." "Pleasantly, I hope, Aunt," said I. "His is like her, Dick," said my aunt, emphatically. "His is like her, as she was that afternoon before she began to fret. Bless my heart, his is like her, as he can look at me out of his 2 eyes." "Is he indeed?" said Mr. Dick. "And his like David, too," said my aunt, decisively. "He is very like David," said Mr. Dick. "But what I want you to be, Trot," resumed my aunt, "I don't mean physically, but morally. You are very well physically, is a firm fellow. A fine firm fellow, with a will of your own." "With resolution," said my aunt, shaking her cap at me, and clenching her hand. "With determination. With character, Trot. With strength of character that is not to be influenced, except on good reason, by anybody, or by anything. That's what I want you to be. That's what your father and mother might both have been, heaven knows, and been the better for it." I intimated that I hoped I should be what she described, "that you may begin, in a small way, to have a reliance upon yourself, and to act for yourself," said my aunt. "I shall send you upon your trip, alone. I did think, once, of Mr. Dick's going with you, but, on second thoughts, I shall keep him to take care of me." Mr. Dick, for a moment, looked a little disappointed, until the honor and dignity of having to take care of the most wonderful woman in the world restored the sunshine to his face. "Besides," said my aunt, "there's the memorial." "Oh, certainly," said Mr. Dick, in a hurry. "I intend, Trotwood, to get that done immediately. It really must be done immediately. And then it will go in, you know. And then," said Mr. Dick, after checking himself, and pausing a long time, "there'll be a pretty kettle of fish." In pursuance of my aunt's kind scheme, I was shortly afterwards fitted out with a handsome purse of money, and a portmanteau, and tenderly dismissed upon my expedition. At parting, my aunt gave me some good advice, and a good many kisses, and said that as her object was that I should look about me, and should think a little, she would recommend me to stay a few days in London, if I liked it, either on my way down into Suffolk, or in coming back. In a word, I was at liberty to do what I would, for 3 weeks or a month, and no other conditions were imposed upon my freedom than the before-mentioned thinking and looking about me, and a pledge to write 3 times a week and faithfully report myself that I went to Canterbury first, that I might take leave of Agnes and Mr. Wickfield, my old room in whose house I had not yet relinquished, and also of the good doctor. Agnes was very glad to see me, and told me that the house had not been like itself since I had left it. "I am sure I am not like myself when I am away," said I. "I seem to want my right hand, when I miss you. Though that's not saying much, for there's no head in my right hand, and no heart. Everyone who knows you, consults with you, and is guided by you, Agnes." "Everyone who knows me, spoils me, I believe," she answered, smiling. "No. It's because you are like no one else. You are so good, and so sweet-tempered. You have such a gentle nature. And you are always right." "You talk," said Agnes, breaking into a pleasant laugh, as she sat at work, "as if I were the late Miss Larkins. Come, "It's not fair to abuse my confidence," I answered, reddening at the recollection of my blue enslaver. "But I shall confide in you, just the same, Agnes. I can never grow out of that. Whenever I fall into trouble, or fall in love, I shall always tell you, if you'll let me, even when I come to fall in love in earnest." "Why, you have always been in earnest," said Agnes, laughing again. "Oh, that was as a child, or a schoolboy," said I, laughing in my turn, not without being a little shamefaced. "Times are altering now, and I suppose I shall be in a terrible state of earnestness one day or other. My wonder is, that you are not in earnest yourself, by this time, Agnes." Agnes laughed again, and shook her head. "Oh, I know you are not," said I, "because if you had been you would have told me. Or at least, for I saw a faint blush in her face, you would have let me find it out for myself. But there is no one that I know of, who deserves to love you, Agnes. Someone of a nobler character, and more worthy altogether than anyone I have ever seen here, must rise up, before I give my consent. In the time to come, I shall have a wary eye on all admirers, and shall exact a great deal from the successful one, I assure you." We had gone on, so far, in a mixture of confidential jest and earnest, that had long grown naturally out of our familiar relations, begun as mere children. But Agnes, now suddenly lifting up her eyes to mine, and speaking in a different manner, said, "Trotwood, there is something that I want to ask you, and that I may not have another opportunity of asking for a long time, perhaps, something I would ask, I think, of no one else. Have you observed any gradual alteration in Papa?" I had observed it, and had often wondered whether she had too. I must have shown as much, now, in my face, for her eyes were in a moment cast down, and I saw tears in them. "Tell me what it is," she said, in a low voice. "I think, shall I be quite plain, Agnes, liking him so much?" "Yes," she said. "I think he does himself no good by the habit that has increased upon him since I first came here. He is often very nervous, or I fancy so." "It is not fancy," said Agnes, shaking her head. "His hand trembles, his speech is not plain, and his eyes look wild. I have remarked that at those times, and when he is least like himself, he is most certain to be wanted on some business." "By Uriah," said Agnes. "Yes, and the sense of being unfit for it, or of not having understood it, or of having shown his condition in spite of himself, seems to make him so uneasy, that next day he is worse, and next day worse, and so he becomes jaded and haggard. Do not be alarmed by what I say, Agnes, but in this state I saw him, only the other evening, lay down his head upon his desk, and shed tears like a child." Her hand passed softly before my lips while I was yet speaking, and in a moment she had met her father at the door of the room, and was hanging on his shoulder. The expression of her face, as they both looked towards me, I felt to be very touching. There was such deep fondness for him, and gratitude to him for all his love and care, in her beautiful look, and there was such a fervent appeal to me to deal tenderly by him, even in my inmost thoughts, and to let no harsh construction find any place against him. She was, at once, so proud of him and devoted to him, yet so compassionate and sorry, and so reliant upon me to be so, too, that nothing she could have said would have expressed more to me, or moved me more. We were to drink tea at the doctor's. We went there at the usual hour, and round the study fireside found the doctor, and his young wife, and her mother. The doctor, who made as much of my going away as if I were going to China, received me as an honored guest, and called for a log of wood to be thrown on the fire, that he might see the face of his old pupil reddening in the blaze. "I shall not see many more new faces in Trotwood Stead, Wickfield," said the doctor, warming his hands. "I am getting lazy, and want ease. I shall relinquish all my young people in another 6 months, and lead a quieter life." You have said so, any time these 10 years, Doctor, Mr. Wickfield answered. But now I mean to do it, returned the doctor. My first master will succeed me. I am in earnest at last, so you'll soon have to arrange our contracts, and to bind us firmly to them, like a couple of knaves. And to take care, said Mr. Wickfield, that you're not imposed on, as you certainly would be, in any contract you should make for yourself. Well, I am ready. There are worse tasks than that, in my calling. I shall have nothing to think of then, said the doctor, with a smile, but my dictionary, and this other contract bargain, Annie. As Mr. Wickfield glanced towards her, sitting at the tea-table by Agnes, she seemed to me to avoid his look with such unwonted hesitation and timidity, that his attention became fixed upon her, as if something were suggested to his thoughts. There is a post come in from India, I observe, he said, after a short silence. By the by. And letters from Mr. Jack Maldon, said the doctor. Indeed. Poor dear Jack, said Mrs. Markleham, shaking her head. That trying climate. Like living, they tell me, on a sand-heap, underneath a burning glass. He looked strong, but he wasn't. My dear doctor, it was his spirit, not his constitution, that he ventured on so boldly. Annie, my dear, I am sure you must perfectly recollect that your cousin never was strong, not what can be called robust, you know, said Mrs. Markleham, with emphasis, and looking round upon us generally, from the time when my daughter and himself were children together, and walking about, arm in arm, the livelong day. Annie, thus addressed, made no reply. Do I gather from what you say, that Mr. Maldon is ill? Asked Mr. Wickfield. Ill, replied the old soldier. My dear sir, he's all sorts of things. Except well, said Mr. Wickfield. Except well, indeed, said the old soldier. He has had dreadful strokes of the sun, no doubt, and jungle fevers and agues, and every kind of thing you can mention. As to his liver, said the old soldier resignedly, that, of course, he gave up altogether when he first went out. Does he say all this? Asked Mr. Wickfield. Say? My dear sir, returned Mrs. Markleham, shaking her head and her fan, you little know my poor Jack Maldon when you ask that question. Say? Not he. You might drag him at the heels of 4 wild horses first. Mamma, said Mrs. Strong. Annie, my dear, returned her mother, once for all, I must really beg that you will not interfere with me, unless it is to confirm what I say. You know as well as I do that your cousin Maldon would be dragged at the heels of any number of wild horses. Why should I confine myself to 4? I won't confine myself to 4, 8, 16, 2 and 30, rather than say anything calculated to overturn the doctor's plans. Wickfield's plans, said the doctor, stroking his face, and looking penitently at his adviser. That is to say, our joint plans for him. I said myself, abroad or at home. And I said, added Mr. Wickfield gravely, abroad. I was the means of sending him abroad. It's my responsibility. Oh, responsibility, said the old soldier. Everything was done for the best, my dear Mr. Wickfield. Everything was done for the kindest and best, we know. But if the dear fellow can't live there, he can't live there. And if he can't live there, he'll die there, sooner than he'll overturn the doctor's plans. I know him, said the old soldier, fanning herself, in a sort of calm prophetic agony, and I know he'll die there, sooner than he'll overturn the doctor's plans. Well, said the doctor cheerfully, I am not bigoted to my plans, and I can overturn them myself. I can substitute some other plans. If Mr. Jack Maldon comes home on account of ill health, he must not be allowed to go back, and we must endeavour to make some more suitable and fortunate provision for him in this country. Mrs. Markleham was so overcome by this generous speech, which, I need not say, she had not at all expected or led up to, that she could only tell the doctor it was like himself, and go several times through that operation of kissing the sticks of a fan, and then tapping his hand with it. After which she gently chid her daughter Annie, for not being more demonstrative when such kindnesses were showered, for her sake, on her old playfellow, and entertained us with some particulars concerning other deserving members of her family, whom it was desirable to set on their deserving legs. All this time, her daughter Annie never once spoke, or lifted up her eyes. All this time, Mr. Wickfield had his glance upon her as she sat by his own daughter's side. It appeared to me that he never thought of being observed by anyone, but was so intent upon her, and upon his own thoughts in connection with her, as to be quite absorbed. He now asked what Mr. Jack Maldon had actually written in reference to himself, and to whom he had written. "Why, here," said Mrs. Markleham, taking a letter from the chimney-piece above the doctor's head. "The dear fellow says to the doctor himself. Where is it? Oh, I am sorry to inform you that my health is suffering severely, and that I fear I may be reduced to the necessity of returning home for a time, as the only hope of restoration." That's pretty plain, poor fellow. His only hope of restoration. But Annie's letter is plainer still. Annie, show me that letter again. "Not now, Mamma," she pleaded in a low tone. "My dear, you absolutely are, on some subjects, one of the most ridiculous persons in the world," returned her mother, "and perhaps the most unnatural to the claims of your own family. We never should have heard of the letter at all, I believe, unless I had asked for it myself. Do you call that confidence, my love, towards Dr. Strong? I am surprised. You ought to know better." The letter was reluctantly produced, and as I handed it to the old lady, I saw how the unwilling hand from which I took it trembled. "Now let us see," said Mrs. Markleham, putting her glass to her eye, "where the passage is. The remembrance of old times, my dearest Annie, and so forth. It's not there. The amiable old proctor, whose he. Dear me, Annie, how illegibly your cousin Maldon writes, and how stupid I am. Doctor, of course. Ah, amiable indeed." Here she left off, to kiss her fan again, and shake it at the doctor, who was looking at us in a state of placid satisfaction. "Now I have found it. You may not be surprised to hear, Annie. No, to be sure, knowing that he never was really strong. What did I say just now? That I have undergone so much in this distant place, as to have decided to leave it at all hazards, on sick leave, if I can, on total resignation, if that is not to be obtained. What I have endured, and do endure here, is insupportable. And but for the promptitude of that best of creatures," said Mrs. Markleham, telegraphing the doctor as before, and refolding the letter, "it would be insupportable to me to think of." Mr. Wickfield said not one word, though the old lady looked to him as if for his commentary on this intelligence, but sat severely silent, with his eyes fixed on the ground. Long after the subject was dismissed, and other topics occupied us, he remained so, seldom raising his eyes, unless to rest them for a moment, with a thoughtful frown, upon the doctor, or his wife, or both. The doctor was very fond of music. Agnes sang with great sweetness and expression, and so did Mrs. Strong. They sang together, and played duets together, and we had quite a little concert. But I remarked two things. First, that though Annie soon recovered her composure, and was quite herself, there was a blank between her and Mr. Wickfield which separated them wholly from each other. Secondly, that Mr. Wickfield seemed to dislike the intimacy between her and Agnes, and to watch it with uneasiness. And now, I must confess, the recollection of what I had seen on that night when Mr. Maldon went away, first began to return upon me with a meaning it had never had, and to trouble me. The innocent beauty of her face was not as innocent to me as it had been. I mistrusted the natural grace and charm of her manner, and when I looked at Agnes by her side, and thought how good and true Agnes was, suspicions arose within me that it was an ill-assorted friendship. She was so happy in it herself, however, and the other was so happy too, that they made the evening fly away as if it were but an hour. It closed in an incident which I well remember. They were taking leave of each other, and Agnes was going to embrace her and kiss her, when Mr. Wickfield stepped between them, as if by accident, and drew Agnes quickly away. Then I saw, as though all the intervening time had been cancelled, and I was still standing in the doorway on the night of the departure, the expression of that night in the face of Mrs. Strong, as it confronted his dot. I cannot say what an impression this made upon me, or how impossible I found it, when I thought of her afterwards, to separate her from this look, and remember her face in its innocent loveliness again. It haunted me when I got home. I seemed to have left the doctor's roof with a dark cloud lowering on it. The reverence that I had for his grey head was mingled with commiseration for his faith in those who were treacherous to him, and with resentment against those who injured him. The impending shadow of a great affliction, and a great disgrace that had no distinct form in it yet, fell like a stain upon the quiet place where I had worked and played as a boy, and did it a cruel wrong. I had no pleasure in thinking, any more, of the grave old broad-leaved aloe trees, which remained shut up in themselves 100 years together, and of the trim smooth grass-plot, and the stone urns, and the doctor's walk, and the congenial sound of the cathedral bell hovering above them all. It was as if the tranquil sanctuary of my boyhood had been sacked before my face, and its peace and honour given to the winds, but morning brought with it my parting from the old house, which Agnes had filled with her influence, and that occupied my mind sufficiently. I should be there again soon, no doubt. I might sleep again, perhaps often, in my old room, but the days of my inhabiting there were gone, and the old time was past. I was heavier at heart when I packed up such of my books and clothes as still remained there to be sent to Dover, than I cared to show to Uriah Heep, who was so officious to help me, that I uncharitably thought him mighty glad that I was going. That I got away from Agnes and her father, somehow, with an indifferent show of being very manly, and took my seat upon the box of the London coach. I was so softened and forgiving, going through the town, that I had half a mind to nod to my old enemy the butcher, and throw him 5 shillings to drink. But he looked such a very obdurate butcher as he stood scraping the great block in the shop, and moreover, his appearance was so little improved by the loss of a front tooth which I had knocked out, that I thought it best to make no advances. The main object on my mind, I remember, when we got fairly on the road, was to appear as old as possible to the coachman, and to speak extremely gruff. The latter point I achieved at great personal inconvenience, but I stuck to it, because I felt it was a grown-up sort of thing. "You are going through, sir?" said the coachman. "Yes, William," I said, condescendingly. I knew him. "I am going to London. I shall go down into Suffolk afterwards." "Shooting, sir?" said the coachman. He knew as well as I did that it was just as likely, at that time of year, I was going down there whaling. But I felt complimented, too. "I don't know," I said, pretending to be undecided, "whether I shall take a shot or not." "Birds is got werry shy, I'm told," said William. "So I understand," said I. "Is Suffolk your county, sir?" asked William. "Yes," I said, with some importance. "Suffolk's my county." "I'm told the dumplings is uncommon fine down there," said William. I was not aware of it myself, but I felt it necessary to uphold the institutions of my county, and to evince a familiarity with them, so I shook my head, as much as to say, "I believe you." "And the punches," said William. "There's cattle. A Suffolk punch, when he's a good UN, is worth his weight in gold. Did you ever breed any Suffolk punches yourself, sir?" "And no," I said, "not exactly." "Here's a gentleman behind me, I'll pound it," said William, as is bread by wholesale. The gentleman spoken of was a gentleman with a very unpromising squint, and a prominent chin, who had a tall white hat on with a narrow flat brim, and whose close-fitting drab trousers seemed to button all the way up outside his legs from his boots to his hips. His chin was cocked over the coachman's shoulder, so near to me, that his breath quite tickled the back of my head, and as I looked at him, he leered at the leaders with the eye with which he didn't squint, in a very knowing manner. "Ain't you?" asked William. "Ain't I what?" said the gentleman behind. "Bred them Suffolk punches by wholesale." "I should think so," said the gentleman. "There ain't no sort of 'orse that I ain't bred, and no sort of dog. 'Orses and dogs is some men's fancy. They're whitles and drink to me, lodging, wife, and children, reading, writing, and arithmetic, snuff, tobacco, and sleep." "That ain't a sort of man to see sitting behind a coach box, is it though?" said William in my ear. As he handled the reins, I construed this remark into an indication of a wish that he should have my place, so I blushingly offered to resign it. "Well, if you don't mind, sir," said William, "I think it would be more correct. I have always considered this as the first fall I had in life. When I booked my place at the coach office, I had had box seat written against the entry, and had given the bookkeeper £0.50. I was got up in a special greatcoat and shawl, expressly to do honour to that distinguished eminence, had glorified myself upon it a good deal, and had felt that I was a credit to the coach. And here, in the very first stage, I was supplanted by a shabby man with a squint, who had no other merit than smelling like a livery stables, and being able to walk across me, more like a fly than a human being, while the horses were at a canter. A distrust of myself, which has often beset me in life on small occasions, when it would have been better away, was assuredly not stopped in its growth by this little incident outside the Canterbury coach. It was in vain to take refuge in gruffness of speech. I spoke from the pit of my stomach for the rest of the journey, but I felt completely extinguished, and dreadfully young. It was curious and interesting, nevertheless, to be sitting up there behind 4 horses, well educated, well dressed, and with plenty of money in my pocket, and to look out for the places where I had slept on my weary journey. I had abundant occupation for my thoughts, in every conspicuous landmark on the road. When I looked down at the trampers whom we passed, and saw that well-remembered style of face turned up, I felt as if the tinker's blackened hand were in the bosom of my shirt again. When we clattered through the narrow street of Chatham, and I caught a glimpse, in passing, of the lane where the old monster lived who had bought my jacket, I stretched my neck eagerly to look for the place where I had sat, in the sun and in the shade, waiting for my money. When we came, at last, within a stage of London, and past the veritable Salem house where Mr. Creakle had laid about him with a heavy hand, I would have given all I had, for lawful permission to get down and thrash him, and let all the boys out like so many caged sparrows. We went to the Golden Cross at Charing Cross, then a mouldy sort of establishment in a close neighbourhood. A waiter showed me into the coffee room, and a chambermaid introduced me to my small bedchamber, which smelt like a hackney coach, and was shut up like a family vault. I was still painfully conscious of my youth, for nobody stood in any awe of me at all, the chambermaid being utterly indifferent to my opinions on any subject, and the waiter being familiar with me, and offering advice to my inexperience. "Well now," said the waiter, in a tone of confidence, "what would you like for dinner?" "Young gentleman likes poultry in general. Have a fowl." I told him, as majestically as I could, that I wasn't in the humour for a fowl. "Ain't you?" said the waiter. "Young gentleman is generally tired of beef and mutton. Have a weal cutlet." I assented to this proposal, in default of being able to suggest anything else. "Do you care for taters?" said the waiter, with an insinuating smile, and his head on one side. "Young gentleman generally has been overdosed with taters." I commanded him, in my deepest voice, to order a veal cutlet and potatoes, and all things fitting, and to inquire at the bar if there were any letters for Trotwood Copperfield, Esquire, which I knew there were not, and couldn't be, but thought it manly to appear to expect. He soon came back to say that there were none, at which I was much surprised, and began to lay the cloth for my dinner in a box by the fire. While he was so engaged, he asked me what I would take with it, and on my replying half a pint of sherry, thought it a favourable opportunity, I am afraid, to extract that measure of wine from the stale leavings at the bottoms of several small decanters. I am of this opinion, because, while I was reading the newspaper, I observed him behind a low wooden partition, which was his private apartment, very busy pouring out of a number of those vessels into one, like a chemist and druggist making up a prescription. When the wine came, too, I thought it flat, and it certainly had more English crumbs in it than were to be expected in a foreign wine in anything like a pure state, but I was bashful enough to drink it, and say nothing, being then in a pleasant frame of mind, from which I infer that poisoning is not always disagreeable in some stages of the process. I resolved to go to the play. It was Covent Garden Theatre that I chose, and there, from the back of a centre box, I saw Julius Caesar and the new pantomime. To have all those noble Romans alive before me, and walking in and out for my entertainment, instead of being the stern taskmasters they had been at school, was a most novel and delightful effect. But the mingled reality and mystery of the whole show, the influence upon me of the poetry, the lights, the music, the company, the smooth stupendous changes of glittering and brilliant scenery, was so dazzling, and opened up such illimitable regions of delight, that when I came out into the rainy street, at 12 o'clock at night, I felt as if I had come from the clouds, where I had been leading a romantic life for ages, to a bawling, splashing, link-lighted, umbrella-struggling, hackney, coach-jostling, patten-clinking, muddy, miserable world that I had emerged by another door, and stood in the street for a little while, as if I really were a stranger upon earth. But the unceremonious pushing and hustling that I received soon recalled me to myself, and put me in the road back to the hotel, whither I went, revolving the glorious vision all the way, and where, after some porter and oysters, I sat revolving it still, at past 1 o'clock, with my eyes on the coffee-room fire. I was so filled with the play, and with the past, for it was, in a manner, like a shining transparency, through which I saw my earlier life moving along, that I don't know when the figure of a handsome well-formed young man dressed with a tasteful easy negligence which I have reason to remember very well, became a real presence to me. But I recollect being conscious of his company without having noticed his coming in, and my still sitting, musing, over the coffee-room fire. At tea last I rose to go to bed, much to the relief of the sleepy waiter, who had got the fidgets in his legs, and was twisting them, and hitting them, and putting them through all kinds of contortions in his small pantry. In going towards the door, I passed the person who had come in, and saw him plainly. I turned directly, came back, and looked again. He did not know me, but I knew him in a moment. Another time I might have wanted the confidence or the decision to speak to him, and might have put it off until next day, and might have lost him. But, in the then condition of my mind, where the play was still running high, his former protection of me appeared so deserving of my gratitude, and my old love for him overflowed my breast so freshly and spontaneously, that I went up to him at once, with a fast-beating heart, and said, "Steerforth, won't you speak to me?" He looked at me, just as he used to look, sometimes, but I saw no recognition in his face. "You don't remember me, I am afraid," said I. "My God!" he suddenly exclaimed. "It's little Copperfield." I grasped him by both hands, and could not let them go, but for very shame, and the fear that it might displease him, I could have held him round the neck and cried, "I never, never, never was so glad. My dear Steerforth, I am so overjoyed to see you." "And I am rejoiced to see you, too," he said, shaking my hand heartily. "Why, Copperfield, old boy, don't be overpowered." And yet he was glad, too, I thought, to see how the delight I had in meeting him affected me. I brushed away the tears that my utmost resolution had not been able to keep back, and I made a clumsy laugh of it, and we sat down together, side by side. "Why, how do you come to be here?" said Steerforth, clapping me on the shoulder. "I came here by the Canterbury coach, today. I have been adopted by an aunt down in that part of the country, and have just finished my education there." "How do you come to be here, Steerforth?" "Well, I am what they call an Oxford man," he returned. "That is to say, I get bored to death down there, periodically, and I am on my way now to my mother's." "You're a devilish amiable-looking fellow, Copperfield. Just what you used to be, now I look at you. Not altered in the least." "I knew you immediately," I said, "but you are more easily remembered." He laughed as he ran his hand through the clustering curls of his hair, and said gaily, "Yes, I am on an expedition of duty. My mother lives a little way out of town, and the roads being in a beastly condition, and our house tedious enough, I remained here tonight instead of going on. I have not been in town half a dozen hours, and those I have been dozing and grumbling away at the play." "I have been at the play, too," said I, "at Covent Garden. What a delightful and magnificent entertainment, Steerforth." Steerforth laughed heartily. "My dear young Davy," he said, clapping me on the shoulder again, "you are a very daisy. The daisy of the field, at sunrise, is not fresher than you are. I have been at Covent Garden, too, and there never was a more miserable business. Hollo, you sir." This was addressed to the waiter, who had been very attentive to our recognition, at a distance, and now came forward deferentially. "Where have you put my friend, Mr. Copperfield?" said Steerforth. "Beg your pardon, sir." "Where does he sleep? What's his number?" "You know what I mean," said Steerforth. "Well, sir," said the waiter, with an apologetic air, "Mr. Copperfield is at present in 44, sir." "And what the devil do you mean," retorted Steerforth, "by putting Mr. Copperfield into a little loft over a stable?" "Why, you see we wasn't aware, sir," returned the waiter, still apologetically, "as Mr. Copperfield was anyways particular. We can give Mr. Copperfield 72, sir, if it would be preferred. Next you, sir." "Of course it would be preferred," said Steerforth, "and do it at once." The waiter immediately withdrew to make the exchange. Steerforth, very much amused at my having been put into 44, laughed again, and clapped me on the shoulder again, and invited me to breakfast with him next morning at 10 o'clock, an invitation I was only too proud and happy to accept. It being now pretty late, we took our candles and went upstairs, where we parted with friendly heartiness at his door, and where I found my new room a great improvement on my old one, it not being at all musty, and having an immense 4-post bedstead in it, which was quite a little landed estate. Here, among pillows enough for 6, I soon fell asleep in a blissful condition, and dreamed of ancient Rome, Steerforth, and friendship, until the early morning coaches, rumbling out of the archway underneath, made me dream of thunder and the gods. David Copperfield. Chapter 20. Steerforth's home. When the chambermaid tapped at my door at 8 o'clock, and informed me that my shaving water was outside, I felt severely the having no occasion for it, and blushed in my bed. The suspicion that she laughed too, when she said it, preyed upon my mind all the time I was dressing, and gave me, I was conscious, a sneaking and guilty air when I passed her on the staircase, as I was going down to breakfast. I was so sensitively aware, indeed, of being younger than I could have wished, that for some time I could not make up my mind to pass her at all, under the ignoble circumstances of the case. But, hearing her there with a broom, stood peeping out of window at King Charles on horseback, surrounded by a maze of hackney coaches, and looking anything but regal in a drizzling rain and a dark brown fog, until I was admonished by the waiter that the gentleman was waiting for me. Tea was not in the coffee room that I found Steerforth expecting me, but in a snug private apartment, red-curtained and turkey-carpeted, where the fire burnt bright, and a fine hot breakfast was set forth on a table covered with a clean cloth, and a cheerful miniature of the room, the fire, the breakfast, Steerforth, and all, was shining in the little round mirror over the sideboard. I was rather bashful at first, Steerforth being so self-possessed, and elegant, and superior to me in all respects, age included. But his easy patronage soon put that to rights, and made me quite at home. I could not enough admire the change he had wrought in the Golden Cross, or compare the dull forlorn state I had held yesterday, with this morning's comfort and this morning's entertainment. As to the waiter's familiarity, it was quenched as if it had never been. He attended on us, as I may say, in sackcloth and ashes. "Now, Copperfield," said Steerforth, when we were alone, "I should like to hear what you are doing, and where you are going, and all about you. I feel as if you were my property." Glowing with pleasure to find that he had still this interest in me, I told him how my aunt had proposed the little expedition that I had before me, and whither it tended. "As you are in no hurry, then," said Steerforth, "come home with me to Highgate, and stay a day or two. You will be pleased with my mother. She is a little vain and prosy about me, but that you can forgive her, and she will be pleased with you." "I should like to be as sure of that, as you are kind enough to say you are," I answered, smiling. "Oh," said Steerforth, "everyone who likes me has a claim on her that is sure to be acknowledged." "Then I think I shall be a favourite," said I. "Good," said Steerforth. "Come and prove it. We will go and see the lions for an hour or two. It's something to have a fresh fellow like you to show them to, Copperfield, and then we'll journey out to Highgate by the coach." I could hardly believe but that I was in a dream, and that I should wake presently in number 44, to the solitary box in the coffee room and the familiar waiter again. After I had written to my aunt and told her of my fortunate meeting with my admired old schoolfellow, and my acceptance of his invitation, we went out in a hackney chariot, and saw a panorama and some other sights, and took a walk through the museum, where I could not help observing how much Steerforth knew, on an infinite variety of subjects, and of how little account he seemed to make his knowledge. "You'll take a high degree at college, Steerforth," said I, "if you have not done so already, and they will have good reason to be proud of you." "I take a degree," cried Steerforth. "Not I. My dear Daisy, will you mind my calling you Daisy?" "Not at all," said I, "that's a good fellow." "My dear Daisy," said Steerforth, laughing, "I have not the least desire or intention to distinguish myself in that way. I have done quite sufficient for my purpose. I find that I am heavy company enough for myself as I am." "But the fame," I was beginning. "You romantic Daisy," said Steerforth, laughing still more heartily, "why should I trouble myself, that a parcel of heavy-headed fellows may gape and hold up their hands? Let them do it at some other man. There's fame for him, and he's welcome to it." I was abashed at having made so great a mistake, and was glad to change the subject. Fortunately, it was not difficult to do, for Steerforth could always pass from one subject to another with a carelessness and lightness that were his own. Lunch succeeded to our sightseeing, and the short winter day wore away so fast that it was dusk when the stagecoach stopped with us at an old brick house at Highgate on the summit of the hill. An elderly lady, though not very far advanced in years, with a proud carriage and a handsome face, was in the doorway as we alighted, and greeting Steerforth as "my dearest James," folded him in her arms. To this lady he presented me as his mother, and she gave me a stately welcome. It was a genteel old-fashioned house, very quiet and orderly. From the windows of my room I saw all London lying in the distance like a great vapour, with here and there some lights twinkling through it. I had only time, in dressing, to glance at the solid furniture, the framed pieces of work, done, I supposed, by Steerforth's mother when she was a girl, and some pictures in crayons of ladies, with powdered hair and bodices, coming and going on the walls, as the newly kindled fire crackled and sputtered. When I was called to dinner, there was a second lady in the dining room, of a slight short figure, dark, and not agreeable to look at, but with some appearance of good looks too, who attracted my attention, perhaps because I had not expected to see her, perhaps because I found myself sitting opposite to her, perhaps because of something really remarkable in her. She had black hair and eager black eyes, and was thin, and had a scar upon her lip. It was an old scar, I should rather call it seam, for it was not discoloured, and had healed years ago, which had once cut through her mouth, downward towards the chin, but was now barely visible across the table, except above and on her upper lip, the shape of which it had altered. I concluded in my own mind that she was about 30 years of age, and that she wished to be married. She was a little dilapidated, like a house, with having been so long to let, yet had, as I have said, an appearance of good looks. Her thinness seemed to be the effect of some wasting fire within her, which found a vent in her gaunt eyes. She was introduced as Miss Dartle, and both Steerforth and his mother called her Rosa. I found that she lived there, and had been for a long time Mrs. Steerforth's companion. It appeared to me that she never said anything she wanted to say, outright, but hinted it, and made a great deal more of it by this practice. For example, when Mrs. Steerforth observed, more in jest than earnest, that she feared her son led but a wild life at college, Miss Dartle put in thus, "Oh, really? You know how ignorant I am, and that I only ask for information, but isn't it always so? I thought that kind of life was on all hands understood to be, It is education for a very grave profession, if you mean that, Rosa," Mrs. Steerforth answered with some coldness. "Oh, yes, that's very true," returned Miss Dartle. "But isn't it, though? I want to be put right, if I am wrong. Isn't it, really?" "Really what?" said Mrs. Steerforth. "Oh, you mean it's not," returned Miss Dartle. "Well, I'm very glad to hear it. Now, I know what to do. That's the advantage of asking. I shall never allow people to talk before me about wastefulness and profligacy, and so forth, in connection with that life, any more." "And you will be right," said Mrs. Steerforth. "My son's tutor is a conscientious gentleman, and if I had not implicit reliance on my son, I should have reliance on him." "Should you?" said Miss Dartle. "Dear me! Conscientious, is he? Really conscientious, now?" "Yes, I am convinced of it," said Mrs. Steerforth. "How very nice!" exclaimed Miss Dartle. "What a comfort! Really conscientious? Then he's not, but of course he can't be, if he's really conscientious. Well, I shall be quite happy in my opinion of him, from this time. You can't think how it elevates him in my opinion, to know for certain that he's really conscientious." Her own views of every question, and her correction of everything that was said to which she was opposed, Miss Dartle insinuated in the same way. Sometimes, I could not conceal from myself, with great power, though in contradiction even of Steerforth. An instance happened before dinner was done. Mrs. Steerforth speaking to me about my intention of going down into Suffolk, I said at hazard how glad I should be, if Steerforth would only go there with me, and explaining to him that I was going to see my old nurse, and Mr. Peggotty's family, I reminded him of the boatman whom he had seen at school. "Oh, that bluff fellow," said Steerforth. "He had a son with him, hadn't he?" "No, that was his nephew," I replied, "whom he adopted, though, as a son. He has a very pretty little niece too, whom he adopted as a daughter. In short, his house, or rather his boat, for he lives in one, on dry land, is full of people who are objects of his generosity and kindness. You would be delighted to see that household." "Should I?" said Steerforth. "Well, I think I should. I must see what can be done. It would be worth a journey, not to mention the pleasure of a journey with you, Daisy, to see that sort of people together, and to make one of 'em." My heart leaped with a new hope of pleasure. But it was in reference to the tone in which he had spoken of that sort of people, that Miss Dartle, whose sparkling eyes had been watchful of us, now broke in again. "Oh, but, really? Do tell me. Are they, though?" she said. "Are they what? And are who what?" said Steerforth. "That sort of people. Are they really animals and clods, and beings of another order? I want to know so much." "Why, there's a pretty wide separation between them and us," said Steerforth, with indifference. "They are not to be expected to be as sensitive as we are. Their delicacy is not to be shocked, or hurt easily. They are wonderfully virtuous, I dare say. Some people contend for that, at least, and I am sure I don't want to contradict them, but they have not very fine natures, and they may be thankful that, like their coarse rough skins, they are not easily wounded." "Really?" said Miss Dartle. "Well, I don't know, now, when I have been better pleased than to hear that. It's so consoling. It's such a delight to know that, when they suffer, they don't feel. Sometimes I have been quite uneasy for that sort of people, but now I shall just dismiss the idea of them, altogether. Live and learn. I had my doubts, I confess, but now they are cleared up. I didn't know, and now I do know, and that shows the advantage of asking, don't it?" I believe that Steerforth had said what he had, in jest, or to draw Miss Dartle out, and I expected him to say as much when she was gone, and we two were sitting before the fire. But he merely asked me what I thought of her. "She is very clever, is she not?" I asked. "Clever? She brings everything to a grindstone," said Steerforth, "and sharpens it, as she has sharpened her own face and figure these years past. She has worn herself away by constant sharpening. She is all edge. What a remarkable scar that is upon her lip." I said. Steerforth's face fell, and he paused a moment. "Why, the fact is," he returned, "I did that." "By an unfortunate accident?" "No. I was a young boy, and she exasperated me, and I threw a hammer at her. A promising young angel I must have been. I was deeply sorry to have touched on such a painful theme, but that was useless now. She has borne the mark ever since, as you see," said Steerforth, "and she'll bear it to her grave, if she ever rests in one, though I can hardly believe she will ever rest anywhere. She was the motherless child of a sort of cousin of my father's. He died one day. My mother, who was then a widow, brought her here to be company to her. She has a couple of £1,000 of her own, and saves the interest of it every year, to add to the principal. There's the history of Miss Rosa Dartle for you." "And I have no doubt she loves you like a brother," said I. "Humph," retorted Steerforth, looking at the fire. "Some brothers are not loved overmuch, and some love. But help yourself, Copperfield. We'll drink the daisies of the field, in compliment to you, and the lilies of the valley that toil not, neither do they spin, in compliment to me, the more shame for me." A moody smile that had overspread his features cleared off as he said this merrily, and he was his own frank, winning self again. I could not help glancing at the scar with a painful interest when we went in to tea. It was not long before I observed that it was the most susceptible part of her face, and that, when she turned pale, that mark altered first, and became a dull, lead-coloured streak, lengthening out to its full extent, like a mark in invisible ink brought to the fire. There was a little altercation between her and Steerforth about a cast of the dice at backgammon, when I thought her, for one moment, in a storm of rage, and then I saw it start forth like the old writing on the wall. It was no matter of wonder to me to find Mrs. Steerforth devoted to her son. She seemed to be able to speak or think about nothing else. She showed me his picture as an infant, in a locket, with some of his baby hair in it. She showed me his picture as he had been when I first knew him, and she wore at her breast his picture as he was now. All the letters he had ever written to her, she kept in a cabinet near her own chair by the fire, and she would have read me some of them, and I should have been very glad to hear them too, if he had not interposed, and coaxed her out of the design. It was at Mr. Creakle's, my son tells me, that you first became acquainted, said Mrs. Steerforth, as she and I were talking at one table, while they played backgammon at another. Indeed, I recollect his speaking, at that time, of a pupil younger than himself who had taken his fancy there. But your name, as you may suppose, has not lived in my memory. He was very generous and noble to me in those days, I assure you, said I, and I stood in need of such a friend. I should have been quite crushed without him. He is always generous and noble, said Mrs. Steerforth. Proudly did I subscribe to this with all my heart, God knows. She knew I did, for the stateliness of her manner already abated towards me, except when she spoke in praise of him, and then her air was always lofty. It was not a fit school generally for my son, said she. Far from it, but there were particular circumstances to be considered at the time, of more importance even than that selection. My son's high spirit made it desirable that he should be placed with some man who felt its superiority, and would be content to bow himself before it, and we found such a man there. I knew that, knowing the fellow, and yet I did not despise him the more for it, but thought it a redeeming quality in him if he could be allowed any grace for not resisting one so irresistible as Steerforth. My son's great capacity was tempted on, there, by a feeling of voluntary emulation and conscious pride, the fond lady went on to say. He would have risen against all constraint, but he found himself the monarch of the place, and he haughtily determined to be worthy of his station. It was like himself. I echoed, with all my heart and soul, that it was like himself. So my son took, of his own will, and on no compulsion, to the course in which he can always, when it is his pleasure, outstrip every competitor, she pursued. My son informs me, Mr. Copperfield, that you were quite devoted to him, and that when you met yesterday you made yourself known to him with tears of joy. I should be an affected woman if I made any pretense of being surprised by my son's inspiring such emotions, but I cannot be indifferent to anyone who is so sensible of his merit, and I am very glad to see you here, and can assure you that he feels an unusual friendship for you, and that you may rely on his protection. Miss Dartle played backgammon as eagerly as she did everything else. If I had seen her, first, at the board, I should have fancied that her figure had got thin, and her eyes had got large, over that pursuit, and no other in the world. But I am very much mistaken if she missed a word of this, or lost a look of mine as I received it with the utmost pleasure, and honoured by Mrs. Steerforth's confidence, felt older than I had done since I left Canterbury, when the evening was pretty far spent, and a tray of glasses and decanters came in. Steerforth promised, over the fire, that he would seriously think of going down into the country with me. There was no hurry, he said, a week hence would do, and his mother hospitably said the same. While we were talking, he more than once called me Daisy, which brought Miss Dartle out again. But really, Mr. Copperfield, she asked, is it a nickname? And why does he give it you? Is it, because he thinks you young and innocent? I am so stupid in these things. I coloured in replying that I believed it was, said Miss Dartle. Now I am glad to know that. I ask for information, and I am glad to know it. He thinks you young and innocent, and so you are his friend. Well, that's quite delightful." She went to bed soon after this, and Mrs. Steerforth retired too. Steerforth and I, after lingering for half an hour over the fire, talking about Traddles and all the rest of them at Old Salem House, went upstairs together. Steerforth's room was next to mine, and I went in to look at it. It was a picture of comfort, full of easy chairs, cushions and footstools, worked by his mother's hand, and with no sort of thing omitted that could help to render it complete. Finally, her handsome features looked down on her darling from a portrait on the wall, as if it were even something to her that her likeness should watch him while he slept. That I found the fire burning clear enough in my room by this time, and the curtains drawn before the windows and round the bed, giving it a very snug appearance. I sat down in a great chair upon the hearth to meditate on my happiness, and had enjoyed the contemplation of it for some time, when I found a likeness of Miss Dartle looking eagerly at me from above the chimney-piece. It was a startling likeness, and necessarily had a startling look. The painter hadn't made the scar, but I made it, and there it was, coming and going, now confined to the upper lip as I had seen it at dinner, and now showing the whole extent of the wound inflicted by the hammer, as I had seen it when she was passionate. I wondered peevishly why they couldn't put her anywhere else instead of quartering her on me. To get rid of her, I undressed quickly, extinguished my light, and went to bed. But, as I fell asleep, I could not forget that she was still there looking. Is it really, though? I want to know. And when I awoke in the night, I found that I was uneasily asking all sorts of people in my dreams whether it really was or not, without knowing what I meant.